We're going to talk a little bit about why we care about uppers. We'll let DJ kind of dive into that. And then we will then go into some of our favorites from 2021 / early 2022. So David, why do we talk about uppers? What do we talk about them? Why do we care?
Yeah, so essentially an upper is what keeps your foot on the platform. So it's pretty important when you're out running, maneuvering, doing whatever you're doing. And so the reason why we talk about it so much is that it can create security, stability, and also just a better lockdown to the platform. And I know we've both have experience with different shoes where if it doesn't quite lock down very well, that can change the ride entirely. Whether it's heel slippage, translation through the midfoot, too much volume in the forefoot. There's a lot of different things that can happen, and they're small micro adjustments, but multiply that over 300 miles and you might have some issues if the upper doesn't work for you. So they're really important. They're really good to have. And they come in a huge variety of materials and colors, and they're fun. So,
that's also true. I think another component that I think we just recognize that uppers are talked about less than midsoles, and less than the foams and the plates and all that. But I think we do see that the upper really does make a difference. And for us in those years where people are like, oh, it's just an upper update, sometimes that makes a big difference. And we'll talk about a couple examples where we've seen uppers make a big difference in the shoe in terms of some of the stability elements that David's talked about. I think the other component that we think about when it comes to uppers is, room for the foot to sit on the platform too. Some are more or less compliant. We have a lot of nerves and arteries that run through our feet, and compression in the wrong areas can cause big problems. And so, there's the space for security and stability. That's very true. And depending on how it's integrated with the platform itself, it can make a difference. And then at the same time, it can just be as simple as if it's too tight over a certain part of the foot, you're going to get numbness and tingling, and it's not going to work. So we'll talk about some of those as well. So let's do this. Let's just do this kind of fun. David, if you had to pick one shoe for the last year and a half that has the best upper, we haven't shared our answers with each other. Do you have the shoe with you by chance?
I wasn't planning on giving it to just one.
Oh, you weren't? Okay. Well, what do you got for us?
All right.
What are some that stick out?
Yeah,
if you had to pick one, could you?
I don't know if I could.
All right, don't do it. Just start talking.
Yeah, I got 3 front runners right off the bat as far as the daily training category. I think I'm going to break it up into mesh and knit. So I'm a big fan of the Wave Knit upper for the Mizuno Waverider 25. This thing is so cozy.
Same, yes.
It locks down. It's just so comfortable throughout the dimensions. It's like a relatively normal width throughout the whole thing, and it just has a very balanced feel to it. And so it's by far one of my favorite uppers of the year. I wish we got it sooner because I would have raved about it before. And it makes, I think, in my opinion, and this is an example between different uppers, I like this shoe way more than the Mesh Waverider 25. Not that I disliked it. It still made our lists, but this made me feel just much more connected, comfortable, cozy. So as far as knit uppers go, I got to give it to that Wave Knit.
That was on my list too, actually, is this knit upper. So in the 24, I actually preferred the mesh upper, but I was the only one on our team who did. But in this case, I was 100% on board. I had some issues that I talked about in our review with the mesh 25, where I would get some pressure at the rotation point and the flex point at the first met, or the big toe joint. And I feel like the knit upper is just a little bit more robust, a little bit more locked in, like it's true to size, but it does dial in a little bit on the foot. And that integration, I think, led to a way smoother transition off the toe because it wasn't as easy to flex through there, and the foot was more connected with the platform instead of kind of just floating over to the toe. So I loved this upper, and just the ride of the shoe for me, it just feels a lot more connected, and like the shoe's coming along for the ride.
Yeah, I will say too, like it felt like it expanded a little bit, but not so much that it became sloppy. Where it was almost just more like swelling accommodation. Like it just kind of had a tiny little bit of give to it, but it was still enough to feel dialed in and just a nice snug hold on the foot. So I thought it was done very well.
And I'm probably the tongue snob on our team.
Totally.
But I am. Yep. Tongue and lace snob.
Tongue
but
and lace.
This is a nice gusseted tongue that has, I think, enough padding, where some of them are just a little bit too thin. But this one is neither like too stuffed where it's, I don't know, just a lot of bulk on top of the foot, and it has enough padding to protect, and it's got flat laces, which I like too. So yeah, I'm definitely a snob, but big kudos to this upper for sure. The other thing I actually wanted to bring up are you going to talk about a racing option or no?
I will. Yeah, I can.
A carbon plated. I'll save it for that then. What other ones? What do you got in the mesh category?
So I'm tied between two.
Oh,
and I could not decide. One is very dialed in, locks in. The last works really well for my foot, anatomical fit. A really well done upper. The other one's more of an air mesh, and it's just so freaking cozy. And so I have the dialed in one is the Magnifly 4 from Topo.
Heck yeah.
So wonderful sock liner on the inside. It's just so comfortable and like soft, but it's very dialed in. And you were talking about the laces. There is a lacing system, these little elastic guys right here. And so when you lock it down, it almost gives it like a little bit of a stretch over the tongue and really pulls it in. And you also just have a nice little wrap around the medial aspect, and it just like holds that foot nice and nice and secure. And it's cozy at the same time.
I've never had such a wide anatomical toe box that locks down so well in the midfoot. I feel like sometimes the wide and like really roomy toe box can lead to some like sliding to the foot forward or sideways, but this thing just locks down so well. It feels are you saying you get scoshing around in that one? Or?
A little bit. I'm not trying to take any shots at the Altra Paradigm. I think it's a good shoe. It's just the forefoot and the midfoot integration there. I did get a little bit of movement. And so you were saying a wide anatomical toe box. Like Topo really dialed that thing in, where I feel like Altra could have done a little bit of a better job with the Paradigm.
Yeah. This is my favorite fit I've ever had. Like there's literally no movement in my heel. It feels as much like a hug to your foot as I've ever felt. And I just think that really helped me connect to the platform, especially it's a 0 millimeter drop shoe. And I do think that being connected to the platform really well prevented me from really slamming down into the heel and causing any problems there. Cause I could just get a lot of training miles in this shoe. And, but the upper is just amazing. I love wearing it around at work too. One of my favorite work shoes.
Yeah, and then
what else you got?
The other major shout out, I got to go with that Newton Gravity Plus, man.
Oh, yeah.
Newton always brings the fire
uppers.
with the uppers, man. Like, I don't think I've had a Newton upper I haven't liked, but this one was just so cozy. Like, the mesh, it's an air mesh. It's very, very thin, but it's also soft on the inside as well. And it just feels like a luxurious piece of mesh that's over your foot. And it's all one piece, too. It's all, like, it's very continuous with each other. And it just flows in and it dials in with the platform really well. Same thing you were saying with the tongue earlier. It's like lightly padded. It's not like it's thick, but it's not thin either. It's just right in the middle, but still breathable. You can even kind of see some of those perforations and stuff in there.
Yeah.
And it just locks down really nicely. The lacing system as well. It just pulls that foot in. Counter doesn't bother me at all. It's nice and secure. So
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, those are the two mesh uppers of the year for me.
Yeah. Mine was just the Magnifly. That thing
for the viewers,
ran away with it for
Nathan
me.
has been talking about the Magnifly for a while. Where
I love that upper so much, and I'm not ashamed of it. I do think if we start to transition towards racing flats and uppers, one of the things that stinks about being in Wisconsin or anywhere that's cold is that there's a lot of uppers that just get put in my closet for the winter because they're just too thin. So a lot of these racing uppers, even like the Adios 6 from Adidas, that's a super thin upper, and they're great in the summer, spring, fall. It's all good, but I got to put them away when it gets really cold because my feet will freeze up. So unless you have like windproof socks, which I have not tested, but it's just not worth it to fight that battle. Like when I'm going out and it's negative 20 wind chill, or even in single digits when it's not a bad wind chill, that's just cold and there's no protection over the foot.
I mean, you could just come to the West Coast.
Yeah.
I've been trying to convince Nate to come out here for a while.
Just sending pics of like, this is where I run every day on the cliffs by the ocean. It's always 70 degrees and sunny. It's beautiful. 75 probably.
No, it's like 70.
Sunny with. Oh, okay.
There's going to be fluctuations, but yeah,
between
people kind of freak
75.
out when it gets over 80, I'd probably say. So it's like, as long as it's in the 70s.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's just those earthquakes.
There's not that. Away. I don't feel them.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Every once in a rare while, you'll feel something, but.
I always think about, when I think of California, it brings me back to high school. And YouTube was kind of like starting to come up as this thing. Mm-hmm. And there was that End of Z World YouTube video. Do you remember that? We probably missed generation a little bit.
I've heard of it. I've heard of the video.
It might not be it's not even worth looking up, but there's this like, there's just talk about how all of a sudden California like pops off. And anyway, not important. That's not why we're here. Let's talk one more or two more upper categories, the racing one, and then we should talk trail a little bit. But what do you got for racing?
Yeah, for racing, I've got to give it to the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite. So I think the way the last is done and the fit throughout, it's just done really well. And so it locks down well, but the midfoot is still wide enough for most people. It's not really, I don't know. A lot of times when you look at a performance shoe, a racing shoe specifically, they're going to really narrow that last through the midfoot and just tighten up, and it makes it feel a little bit more aggressive. I think Puma did a great job of just slightly widening it out, but still giving you that option of locking it down if you want to. Yeah. And they do have that little strap that runs through the medial aspect of the shoe there, and it kind of connects and integrates with that lacing system and really kind of pulls it up. And so if you like that fit, it's there for you. If you don't want it, you don't have to do it. And it also has a relatively wide forefoot for a racing shoe, great for swelling accommodation. And the heel, it's just like, it's reinforced pretty well for not having a counter. Like there's a small little piece of reinforcement here, but I would not call that a counter, you know?
Did you have any irritation from that bar in the back? I'm going to call it a bar. No, I didn't either.
None.
I'd seen other people report that, but I did not have any issues with it.
Yeah, and I've had multiple runs over 20 miles in these guys, so
yeah,
they were fine.
They were quote unquote in contention for your marathon shoe when we all knew it was going to be Alpha Fly the whole time.
No, I might have gotten a tiny little bit of irritation on the medial part of the forefoot after like that many miles.
That's what 20 miles is going to do.
Yeah, like I'm not convinced that was the shoe's fault.
Yeah. I think when we think about upper importance, when you combine uppers, when you're talking about carbon plated or stiff soled shoes, that's where a big factor comes in too. Because if you have this carbon plated shoe and you have this foam that's supposed to be working together and your heel is just popping out of it, you're losing a lot of the mechanical advantage that you're trying to get through this whole system that's under your foot. So lacing down and having an upper that actually secures the foot is a big deal, which is why I personally liked the Endorphin Pro 2 over the Endorphin Pro 1, because they did adjust that upper. They moved the lacing system a little to the side. They narrowed in the heel a little bit so you could get a better lockdown. And I just felt like the shoe being connected to the foot, and then take it a step further, and the Endorphin Pro Plus had a totally different upper story there too, with just totally stripped down and narrowed even more throughout the whole thing, to give that kind of track spike like upper. It does make a difference in these racing flats for sure. But let's talk about trails. What do you got there?
Yeah, so one of them I don't have on me. If I'm going lightweight, nimble, I got to go with the Hokas and all. So it's nothing overly fancy or anything to necessarily rave about, but it's done well. And it's relatively wide to the forefoot, like just kind of normal width throughout. Locks down through the heel pretty well, and the lacing system's done nicely through the tongue there. It's definitely more of a performance upper for the trails. This isn't something that you're going to expect a whole lot of just reinforcement. And it's not going to give you like... you're not going to get a lot of bells and whistles on that upper, but it's nice. It's streamlined and it locks down well. The other one is the Brooks Caldera. I don't have that on me, but I felt they did a pretty good job of integrating that upper with the platform, especially for how high stack that was. No plate, high stack, soft foam, full contact outsole, and a sharp rocker. And they were able to lock that thing down pretty well. And you could still get some ground feel because of how connected your foot was to it. It was a little bit narrow probably, but if you have a narrow foot, like, it should work fine.
Yep. Cool. I have one for the trails. And it's an Ultra shoe.
Nice.
Ultra Lone Peak 5 I've been wearing. I do not have the 6, but when it comes to trail running and hiking, I'm not a huge fan of waterproof stuff. Like my experience, like I was out on a backpacking trip in Tennessee in the Smokies, and I had a pair that I was wear testing of these hiking boots, and they were waterproof, but then anytime water got in, it just wouldn't come out either. So I just was like, it rained like crazy the first day. There was like 50-mile-an-hour winds. And then when we got up to the summit, it was 70-mile-an-hour winds with this, and the rain was like literally sideways. It was the craziest experience. But so I don't really like waterproof. This is not a waterproof upper, but it's kind of a synthetic material that they make comfortable through this kind of little bit of a lining of a cloth on the inside. And I just think it's very quick drying, and it almost feels like it allows a lot of breathability for when you do get wet or sweaty or whatever. It feels like it can just like get through there just fine, but it also at the same time doesn't allow things to just soak up and sit there. So the shoe itself dries out quick, which allows, socks to dry out too over those long like hiking miles or backpacking trips and stuff like that. So I really love it for that. The one thing I had an issue with here is like you can just see, do you see how wide that heel is?
Very, almost like a big circle.
It's really wide. That's my one problem. There's no heel counter either. So like it's pretty malleable there, but it does lock down well. It's just a little bit wide. So I would get a couple rocks that would like just slide into the side of my foot. My heel wasn't sliding, but there's just literally enough space for little pebbles to fall in there. That's my only gripe with it, but it's just super comfortable. And I can see why this shoe is the number one used for thru hikers on the Appalachian Trail. Appalachian. Okay. I'm from Wisconsin, so you can't blame me for pronouncing things wrong with A's. It's just part of my life. So there we go. That's kind of our run through of some of our top uppers, but we just wanted to give uppers a little bit of a platform because, like we said, they don't get talked about, but they do make a difference. In terms of shoes that had impacts on, like we talked about, compressing nerves and things like that, the change from the Endorphin Shift 1 to the Endorphin Shift 2 introduced some seams along the lateral and medial side, which for some, like Matt, they provided extra stability because the seam and the material below the seam were a little bit more of a dense and rigid material, and then it was a stretchier mesh on top. Whereas for people like Ryan, our contributor, and even Andrea, they talked about how that led to too much compression of their foot, and they actually got numbness in the version 2. So, the type of material, whether if it's accommodating or not, can really make a difference for you. And that's why being able to try on shoes, and we had a post out last week about the Run Cat, which talks about as you go in and you're looking for a shoe. We also have our new runner, kind of like how to find your first shoe resource on our website too. Those talk about the Run Cat and what categories of comfort you can think about to find the right shoe for you. That's one of them, is finding that comfort through the upper. So you can check those out too for a little bit of help, but uppers matter. But do you have anything else on uppers?
Yeah, and like just basically piggybacking off of what you're saying, but what works for one person might not work for the other. And so I remember specifically, and I'm looking at it right now. I'm going to grab this thing. It's a little bit of an arm length away, so I might have to extend out. Here we go. I don't know why I have this in arm reaching distance, but
curious to see what shoe this is. Oh man,
Skechers XCR, baby, we're bringing it back. I like this shoe. That shoe. That's funny you bring that out because they sent it to me and I put it on and I ran a quarter mile and my foot was numb, so I sent it back. That's what I thought of. I remember you being like, "I can't wear this,"
And you guys were like, this is great.
I was like, this is awesome. Yeah, it like hugs on the midfoot. The like for being an XC shoe, it was just very just like locked in, dialed in. I ran USAs in this and it was fine. Didn't tweak my ankle, didn't do nothing, you know, like
I forgot about that. Holy cow.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of like the old Victory design, like the Victory XC.
Yeah. Nice.
Hopefully they weren't knocking that off.
I forgot about that shoe. Cool.